Hey everyone, I just wanted to take a second and do a video response on the updated Brandenburg versus Ohio decision and how that has impacts both to the United States now, but also how the First Amendment works. For a little bit of context, Brandenburg versus Ohio is the case where a KKK leader in Ohio was convicted because they were using not only what is considered banned speech because it was inciting violence, but also assembling to teach the behaviors of criminality and harmful doctrines. What this functionally shows us, first and foremost, is that it puts us in the position to where what we have to look at is whether or not this could be an immediate or a delayed incitement of violence, both of which the Brandenburg versus Ohio case end up addressing at the end of the decision. But let's look at some specific implications of Brandenburg versus Ohio, starting with what the main decision is. The main decision cites that it is directed to incite or produce imminent lawless action and is likely to produce such action, meaning that if we look at a situation and there is a clear and present danger being established by the speech, then it's something that's not protected. Even further, this is some of the most clear First Amendment action and outlines because it does outline that it was specific to lawless action. If we look at the lawlessness, what we have to then recognize is that it proposes a direct threat to not only individuals but also society as a whole. Second, we can look at some specific examples. First, when we look at direct incitement of violence, we can threaten to set someone on fire or threaten to burn a building down and make it very clear in public that that's what's happening. But we also can have indirect violence. For individuals that cause indirect but lawless panic at the end of the day, what we have to then reflect upon specifically is the idea that they are creating danger for an individual. By yelling something like fire in a crowded theater or bomb in an airport, it puts people in a position of unrest. And if individuals are nervous and concerned, then what happens is they're put in a position where they're constantly wondering if something bad is going to happen, especially when you're doing something in a crowded area, because then you're inciting mass chaos and producing a concern for all individuals that is both unwarranted but also just functionally not true. We can then look at how the legal action may not occur immediately. This is the second part of Brandenburg versus Ohio, which it says that the illegal action is not just something that happens immediately, but instead it is something, an action that can be delayed by the different decisions. By saying that someone's going to shoot an endangered animal, what they're doing is they're not only telling and proposing someone is going to incite lawlessness, but also they're showing that it's going to be created down the road. The other way that this is done, and perhaps the most common way in the application of Brandenburg versus Ohio, is when you're doing something like teaching. If you are teaching modes of hate, and if you are teaching modes in which to actually cause violence, what we then have to recognize is that you're creating a violence for a very long time. People say that violence is a very circular action, and when we look at Brandenburg versus Ohio, we find that that's incredibly true. But then we can look at the criticisms specifically of Brandenburg versus Ohio. The main criticism is that they're being criticized for vagueness about the advocacy and teaching clauses, which would incite lawless action. Like we're talking about how immediate threat may not occur, but we see that there's delayed threat. If there's delayed threat, we have to recognize that this may have been done by teaching. But Brandenburg versus Ohio doesn't specifically outline how teaching impacts not only the decision of the court case, but also the legality of the First Amendment. Because it is vague, there are sometimes that people are going to get away with teaching to incite lawless action, either by hate or just by pure ignorance. So when we take a step back and we look at Brandenburg versus Ohio, there are a few key takeaways. First and foremost, remember that the original decision was about banning speech and assembly to teach the behaviors of criminality and harmful doctrines. So we're not going to be allowed to teach things like the KKK manifesto or things like that, because that can incite violence down the line. We also have to look at the fact that we have imminent and direct threats, or we have delayed threats. both of them are threats that actually produce concern widespread across the public. And so when we then take a step back, we have to recognize that while Brandenburg versus Ohio is in purpose, it sets up a pretty good foundation for evaluating the lawless behavior. Thanks, guys.